Okay, everybody, we're about to start.
Testing. I think so. Testing 1, 2, 3. It's not a micro. It's to record. It doesn't magnify the sound.
It is. They can
Really?
hear you on the live
Yeah.
stream.
Testing 1, 2,
No,
3.
I didn't turn on the speaker.
Okay.
All right. Okay, guys, we're gonna start.
Excuse me. No. No.
The radio mic. Okay, guys, if we can all be quiet, Robert, thank you so much for coming.
Welcome to all those that are joining us here tonight. First and foremost, naturally he walks out. I want to thank Eliyahu and Olivia Rouimi for being the hostess with the mostess in terms of me personally when I come to Florida, making me very, very comfortable and enabling to accomplish good things, and especially for hosting this class tonight on an incredibly important topic. Tonight's topic is Rabbi Nachman's wisdom on successful parenting, communicating with our children as they grow. To do justice to this topic, we need a few months. But we're going to start. And actually, there was a class given last night in North Miami Beach, which was also a beginning of this topic. And there's a website, breslovtorah.com, that has about 6,000 classes in English on a very wide spectrum of topics. And these classes will also be there for those that would want to see it. We have cards here that have the information for those that would want to follow up on a series of classes on this topic. First of all, parenting. How many parents are there? Anybody? No. How many parents are there for one child in a family? 2, 3. Anybody for more? Anyone for more? Who's the third? Who's the first or the third? Hashem. The Gemara tells us, and this isn't a joke. This is extremely important because thousands of parents suffer with the burden of knowing this is such a struggle. Just 2 parents, just the 2 of us, having to figure this out and having to try to raise a family. But if you realize that it's not just the 2 of us, there's a third parent who's actually the first parent, the most important parent. The Gemara tells us that when a child is brought into the world, there are 3 that are contributing to the existence of the child. The father provides the bone structure, the mother provides the flesh and the blood, and Hashem puts the life inside. Hashem puts the battery inside, the neshama, the soul. So that in terms of healthy parenting, the first thing is not to leave anyone out. And this is unfortunately a very, very important point. I hear it all the time. I hear it from mothers and fathers. My kids, my child. I won't have my child doing this. That alone is a problem for a child to hear that. It's not my child, it's our child. It's our child, for starters, the father and the mother. And when we start using the word my child, automatically, directly or indirectly, it plays down the role of the other parent. I don't want my child doing this. It's our child, our children. And the hour, if we want to really get serious, the hour is all 3, Hashem, Daddy, Mommy, in that order. Because the Torah makes it perfectly clear that if a daddy or a mommy is not aware of the battery inside the child, they're not aware that there's a soul, that the life of the child was not put in by neither the father or the mother. It was put in by Hashem, if they're not aware of that. And a father tells a child to get into the car on Shabbat or to eat something not kosher, we know that this week, this Shabbat, we're going to be reading the 10 Commandments, Parshat Yisro. One of the most important, one of the 10 Commandments, respect your father and mother. Kabed et avicha v'et imecha. But the Torah makes it perfectly clear that's when they are in sync with the other parent, with the third parent. If a father or mother, chas v'shalom, contradicts Hashem, if a father or mother insists that a child eat unkosher, or a child hits someone, or a child hate another Jew, or anything like that, the commandment of respect for a parent doesn't begin. It doesn't apply to that whatsoever. And in fact, the Torah goes so far as to say that a father who enjoys going to synagogue, enjoys going to shul, and one of the greatest pleasures of a father is to go with their sons, with their children to the synagogue, to have my sons sitting next to me in the synagogue praying together. It's very special for those that have experienced it. What if a child at a certain age, we're not talking about 3 or 4 years old, what if a child at 16 or 17 years old loves daddy, appreciates daddy, but in terms of the synagogue that daddy goes to, there are certain issues there that the child feels that they could pray better in a different synagogue? Do we say that if the father wants the child praying with them, that that's the right thing to do? Or is it here now? We're not talking about that the other synagogue gives better cake or kugel. We're talking about a legitimate reason. They pray more slowly. The prayers are more serious. There's a rabbi there that gives Torah classes, something like that. So in the laws of Shulchan Aruch, in the code of laws, in the laws of respect for a parent, it's made perfectly clear that in this case, the father should allow the son to go to where he will pray better. Again, if it's something that's clear, sometimes there are circumstances why a parent needs, they're part of a certain community, they have a reason why they go to a certain synagogue. But again, we're always realizing that there's 3 of us in this. Hashem and me and my wife, and there's what I like and what I enjoy, and there's what my wife likes and enjoys, and then there's what Hashem prefers or what Hashem likes, and always considering that in our decision making. In the times we're living in today, unfortunately, very unfortunately, most parents will admit that we don't spend that much time, certainly not quality time, with our children. Whether it's mommy or daddy or both, depending on circumstances, whether they're working, whether they're studying, they're taking courses, all kinds of hundreds of different reasons. But the end result is, if you add up the amount of quality time with a child, and when I talk about quality time, a person would say, well, a lot of time, I don't really know what to tell my kids. The answer is, you don't even have to know what to tell them. 80 to 90% of a good relationship with a child is being able to listen to the child. Allowing a child to have the luxury of a parent who's genuinely interested in what the kid has to say, whether the child is 3, 4 years old, or whether the child is 8, 10 years old, or 18, 19 years old. Unfortunately, there are thousands of cases, and many that I'm personally aware of kids who don't talk to their parents in their teenage years when they're 17, 18. And it's a horrific feeling. It's terrible, lousy feeling to know how hard I work to provide for my family, to give my family the best home, the best of everything, and my kid won't even talk to me. I ask him how are things, and I get a 1-word answer, or I get a 0-word answer. And where is that coming from? And unfortunately, many times it's coming from the beginning. From the beginning, when a child had a lot to say, and I didn't have time to listen. I didn't make time to listen. And I didn't show the respect? Respect for a child? The answer is definitely, definitely. It's not to be compared. It's not on the same level as the respect that a child's supposed to have for a parent. But a Jew is supposed to have respect for a flower. The Ari Kadosh writes that a person's, sometimes people are walking past the tree and they see a leaf and they tear it off. And you ask, why'd you do that? I saw it, so I tore it. The Ari Kadosh says, be careful. There are souls in those things. There's life. Hashem gave life to that thing. It grows. You'll come back a week later, a month later, a year later. You'll see that the sapling, the plant, is a couple inches taller. It's growing every second. The Gemara tells us Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the greatest chief rabbis of the Jews during the time of the Gemara says there was never a case that he walked past a human being, a non-Jew, without greeting that person first. No one ever beat him in greeting them. Today, there are religious people. I joke about this in our community in Israel. There are religious people, religious men, who try to avoid looking at women. I look at my own wife. I appreciate my own wife. I try to avoid looking at women. There are men who are more religious, and they don't look at men. They walk past the guy in the street. They walk past a religious Jew in the street and don't say hello, looking down, looking. How do you do that when the Torah tells us that Rabbi Akiva's rabbi's rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the greatest giants, he's compared to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu lived 120 years. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived 120 years. Moshe Rabbeinu's life was divided into 3 sections. The Gemara shows parallels between him and Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Gemara praises him. Out of all the things you could praise a big rabbi about is that he says hello. The answer is obviously it must be pretty important. It must be pretty important to say hello to someone, to greet someone. And here we're talking about the strangers. Here we're talking about a non-Jew. Imagine how much more so for kids to be educated, for kids to know that a parent says hello and that a child says hello. You walk into many homes today, unfortunately, a guest comes in, a grandparent comes in, and the grandchild doesn't say hello. They don't say hello. Where is that coming from? The answer is that they weren't taught. They weren't taught that this is an incredible, important element, that one of the greatest rabbis, when the Torah wants to say how special he was, this is what they say about him, that he made sure to greet a non-Jew. How much more so a Jew? How much more so an uncle, a parent's friend comes into a home? Not, I'm busy, I'm incredible, important point. Again, I think nothing is coincidence how timely things are. This Shabbat, we're going to be reading Parshat Yitro, which has one of the most important events in Jewish history. After 2,448 years, when the Torah had not been given officially to the world, Hashem decided the time has come. The time has come to give the Torah to the Jewish people, and in a way that the whole world is going to be aware of this, with tremendous fanfare. Thunder, lightning, the whole mountain was smoking, Har Sinai was smoking. You're going to read about it throughout the week, or on Shabbat when they read the Sefer Torah, to read that this was incredible. And it talks about fire. The mountain was on fire. There was thunder. There was the sound of the shofar. All of this fear, all kinds of things to inject fear. Person would say, what does that have to do with Judaism? What does that have to do with Torah? Was this a Steven Spielberg production? Hashem wanted to show. What is this all about? And the answer is, this is about the most important element in starting a relationship with a child. We are called Hashem's children, and Hashem set the stage to show us exactly how you begin a relationship with a child. It begins with fire. It begins with fear. It begins with respect. The Torah says Hashem lifted up the mountain and he held it over their heads and he said, if you accept the Torah, fine, we'll be friends. If you don't, there'll be consequences. Now, the Jews had said, the Torah tells us that Hashem had offered the Torah to other nations first to give them a fair chance. And each one of the other nations, when they were offered the Torah, they said, one second, before I make any kind of commitment or agreement, I need to know what this is all about. Now, who is the one offering the Torah? The creator of the world, the creator of man, the one who made all the trees and the plants and the food and everything. And these people couldn't trust that if Hashem is saying, I'd like to make an agreement with you, I'd like to sign a contract with you, there was a question as to whether that would be to our benefit or to our detriment. So the Gemara tells us how each one of the other nations showed doubt in the goodness of Hashem, and because of that, Hashem gave them an answer. He gave them a response of something that would easily turn them off to accepting the Torah. To one nation, he said, the Torah is about not committing murder. They said, that's not for us. We live by the sword. Esav, we live by the sword. Another nation, adultery, each one. And when he offered the Torah to the Jewish people, the response was, Na'aseh v'nishma. Where do we sign? Where do we sign? First we'll sign, and then you'll explain it to us. Na'aseh, we're committed 100%. And then afterwards, you'll tell us the details. You'll fill in the details for us. So if that was our response, why the fire? Why the fire? Why the fear? The answer is because we know that in relationships with adults, there's an expression that people fall in love. They fell in love and they got married, and at a certain point in time, unfortunately, in today's times, the statistics are that there are thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of people that fell in love and then fell out of love. A week later, a year later, 5 years later, sometimes 25 years later, people fall out of love and they end relationships. And the question is, where did we go wrong? What was lacking here that didn't allow it to be something permanent? And one of these simple answers is very simple. We put up a building of 3 floors, 100 floors, but we left out the foundation. We forgot that you can put up a building and it can stand for a certain period of time, but if any big winds are blowing and the foundation is a healthy, proper foundation, that building is going to fall. The foundation is yirah. Yirah means fear and respect. Respect. There has to be an element of respect. There has to be an element of consequences. A person, reward and punishment. Take a look at society. We're driving in Florida, New York, wherever we are. There's signs up, 60 miles an hour, 60 miles, not 80 miles, whatever it is. Checked by radar. What? Why does that have to say checked by radar? Radar checked or other things. In Israel, there's more things. Helicopter, all kinds of. Why? We need babysitter. We need to be punished. The answer is yes. We're human beings. We have a good inclination and an evil inclination. We have Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Hara. And many of us, possibly all of us, test the waters many times. We test the situation to see, are we going to get away with it? Or how certain foundation of respect and consequences. You have a child who's 3-4 years old and a parent is in the street. They're crossing. A child walks into the street and a parent says, go back or stop. If that kid doesn't know what the word stop means, if you have to say it 12 times, and then at the 12th time, the child laughs and keeps running, lo aleinu, there are children that aren't living today because of that. And worse. Person say there's worse than death. There's people who are living horrible, horrific lives because they weren't taught, they weren't given a healthy foundation and a healthy building. They weren't shown yirah and ahava. Now, either one without the other one is a loser, can't work. It requires a combination of respect. Here again, Hashem began with fire, with thunder, with lightning. But then the pasuk goes on to say, when Moshe Rabbeinu reviews what took place at Mount Sinai, he says, let me tell you why Hashem did all of this. Leba'avur nasot etchem ba Elokim. Hashem came with all of this power, levavur nasot etchem, to lift you up, to elevate you, to bring you close. Uva'avur tihiyeh yirato al panechem levilti techto. And so that in addition, you'll have respect, you'll be afraid to sin. A combination. Note, nasot etchem, to lift you up, and at the same time that there should be fear and respect. A mother nurses a child. She nurses the child. Hashem created women. He gave them a certain part of the body by which they nurse a child. The life of the child depends on that. In Hebrew, it's called shadayim. Shadayim. The rabbis tell us that the word shadayim has a code to it. Small doche, yemin mekarev, which is an expression in the Gemara. With the left hand pushing away, with the right hand bringing close. That a healthy relationship between a parent and child is that we are not equals. This isn't a negotiation where I say, yeah, why? Where everything a parent says, a child can say why. There are times, many times, when if a parent says something, the answer is yes. And like we said at Mount Sinai, na'aseh, v'nishma. And afterwards, if the parent has the time and if the parent understands that this is a good opportunity to explain why to do it, then of course it's very good to educate a child. But it's not dependent on that. The obedience, the ability to accept is not dependent on a negotiation at age 3, 4, 5, 6, because if we do that, we're going to see a couple of years later that we're going to lose the negotiation, or there won't be a negotiation. There's a famous parable that I heard from one of my rabbis. There was a city in a particular country where the king treated the people very fair, not just fair, but better than fair. He really understood his responsibility as a leader and tried to do everything possible for the city to prosper. But as it would be, there's always smart Alecs and people who aren't satisfied with making money legally in good ways. So there's people who look for other ways, black marketeering, all kinds of things, to avoid taxes, even though the taxes there were reasonable, very reasonable. And they got caught once, and the king said, warning. It happened the second time, and the third time the king said, I had enough. No more. You people don't appreciate the way you're being treated. We have to make a change. And he built a gigantic wall around the city. No more commerce, no more going in and out, no more interaction with other cities or other people. You'll make a living, you'll work with each other here. It minimal, doesn't matter. Okay, they had no choice. The only time that anyone left the city was for a funeral. When a funeral took place, the cemetery was outside the city. There were guards at the entrance. They'd open the doors. The funeral procession would go out, bury, and come back in. A couple of months later, the king is outside the city at a distance, and he's watching, and he sees a funeral procession. And he stops. He's curious to see how it's going. He's watching. And suddenly he tells his chief officer, I want you to run there and stop the funeral. Stop the funeral right away, and don't let anybody leave. Okay, goes rushing, galloping away, rushes, gets up to them. Everybody freeze, nobody move. The people are looking. The audacity in the middle of a funeral. And the king comes riding up also, And he says, open the coffin. Open the coffin. Open the coffin right now. They open the coffin, and he sees jewelry and all kinds of things in it, all a smuggling operation. Everybody to jail. Everybody. Soldiers gather all the people, put everybody into prison. A couple of days later, the king comes by. He wants to see the response. So sure enough, they tell the people they're in jail that the king is coming. He comes in, and people start crying and screaming, "We're so sorry," putting on a real show of tears. And there's one smart aleck there that's curious. And he says, "Your Royal Highness, how did you know? How did you figure this out?" And the king looks at him and he smiles. "I'll tell you exactly how I figured it out. I've been to funerals before. You ever see a funeral procession where no one's crying? There's no tears? You didn't cry then, you cry now." And this was said as a parable for parents who have children, small children. And in today's times, the way the culture, the way the society is, there's so many things that are available, so many toys, so many trinkets. There are certain toys that should say on them for adults only. And the toys, unfortunately, they don't put those markings on it. On the contrary, they encourage kids to use them. Dangerous toys like a cell phone, other things like that. And most parents today have a weakness. They don't enjoy seeing kids crying. They don't enjoy being called a dirty rat or a meanie or any of the other terms that people use. I don't know what kids see on TV today, the different terms that they could use to insult a parent or, that kind of thing. Who wants to go through that? It's easier to, okay, just take it, just that kind of thing. And most kids know that when a parent says no, no doesn't mean no. No just means you didn't put enough pressure on. You didn't ask enough times. If you ask enough times, no becomes yeah. Everybody knows that. And unfortunately, there people are crying later that how did this happen? How did this gap develop between parent and child where I can't tell my son or I can't tell them anything? They're not interested. They're not asking, number one. And if I try to say something, they look at me like I'm nuts. Where in the world did I get the idea that I'm in a position to tell them anything, to tell them what to do or not to do, or to give any kind of advice? And unfortunately, it's because we didn't start at the right age. We didn't start from day one. The Gemara tells us that one of the greatest rabbis in the Gemara, he was called Chakima Diyudain, the wisest of the Jews. The Gemara actually tells us that during his time, that was when Greek philosophy was really flourishing. And there was a whole incident where the king offered a challenge for the Jews to select one rabbi, one person, to go challenge the 60 wise men of Athens, to challenge them in a debate. And he said, if you win, I give you permission to do whatever you want with them. If they win, it's the other way. And this rabbi was chosen, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, one of the great rabbis, was chosen for this mission. The Gemara says that before he was born, in those days, they had stargazers. And people sometimes would consult with these stargazers to see certain messages in the future based on the zodiac. And his mother was told that he's going to be a thief. Your son, this Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, this is going to be a thief. So she went to consult with the rabbis and she said, is there anything that I could do to protect him, to help him, to be able to know that what's mine is mine and what someone else's is someone else's? And they said yes. They said, make sure to keep his head covered from a young age, from when he's a baby. Make sure he has a head covering, because that'll remind him that there's an eye above. There's somebody watching. Big Daddy is watching. And sure enough, the Torah says she did this from when he was a small child. She was careful to put a head covering on with a little string so it wouldn't fall off, that kind of thing. And the Gemara says one day when he was a child, he was outside and his head covering fell off, and he saw some fruit, something that didn't belong to him. And he was about to go for it. And suddenly he caught himself. He realized that he didn't have the head. He put it back on and calmed down. Here's an example of something, this concept of authority, the concept of authority, that there's a creator, there's someone who created that, there's a boss. Children, even at a young age, can look at a tree, can look at things and recognize and say, who put that plant there? Who made that plant? Who made this city? I don't know. That a parent has an opportunity to be able to say, this didn't come about by itself. I can't do this. I can't create a plant. There's a creator. There's someone who created the world and has given us everything, the fruit, the water, everything. When you were born, you came into the world naked, nothing, no clothing, no food, nothing at all. We have this term entitlement today, a term that's used, that many children and many adults suffer from entitlement. I don't deserve to have this kind of problem. I deserve better. Or kids who are given things, I don't want that one. There's a better one than that kind of thing. Because they weren't taught appreciation, they weren't reminded that they weren't shown a newborn baby. You see this? No clothes, nothing. Where's the clothes going to come from? The answer is Hashem will bless the father to be able to earn money, to be able to buy clothing, and mommy will sew the clothing or mommy will shop the clothing. None of this happens automatically. It takes tremendous effort and work. And it's something that, and therefore, if somebody gives you something, to be able to say thank you. The concept of thank you, not for the person who's giving it, for yourself. If you don't say thank you, you're not a human being, you're an animal. A human being speaks, a human being recognizes authority, a human being recognizes appreciation, where something comes from. And if a person doesn't have that, unfortunately, sometimes it's because they weren't taught or they don't see it. Here again, parents interacting with each other. We're busy. There's so many distractions today. The distraction of the phone. A husband sits down. A wife spent a few hours preparing dinner, and she spent time thinking about what the husband likes and what he wants and putting it out. And the husband eats and leaves the table, and a child sees that. And he didn't hear thank you so much. How did you know that this is exactly what I like? And even if it's not exactly what he likes, but if he knows that she put time and effort to preparing it, you're allowed to lie. It's a mitzvah to lie, the Gemara says, for the sake of shalom bayit, if it's being done in a good, healthy way. Picture a kid seeing that and being able to realize, and a person would say, wow, this is so hard. This is so hard. This isn't hard. This is enjoyable. There are people, the Torah tells us that there are people that think that there's no greater pleasure in the world than receiving. Somebody gave me $50,000. Somebody gave me a new car. Person would say, somebody gave me a house. It's nice. It's great. But the Torah says there's something much more enjoyable. Giving. The one who gives, the parent who gives to a child, or a person who's privileged to be able to give something to somebody else. If the person is sane, if the person is normal and healthy, they know that there's no comparison. As much as the person who received the gift enjoys it, the one who was privileged, that I was blessed enough, that I had the opportunity, a parent who was privileged to be wealthy and able to give a child gets married, we're giving you a home, we're giving you a car. The incredible privilege and joy of being able to do that. Here again, if kids observe this, if they see this being done, then they can absorb it and they can choose to follow or not to follow. But if they don't see it, and they don't hear it, where are they supposed to get it from? On top of this, the Torah people know that times change. I get into a car today. I live in Israel, and those that have been to Israel know It's a lot of mountains and valleys, ups and downs. You're driving in a car, and people who walk on Shabbat, I walk about a half hour to go to a certain special synagogue that I like to go to. And it's in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim. And there's ups and downs, there's hills. And when you're going up a real steep hill, it takes effort. And then I get into the car on Sunday or another day, and I'm going up a mountain, and I just press on the accelerator like an eighth of an inch. And the car takes the mountain like nothing. And I say to myself, wow. Look at the luxury that we are living in today. 100 years ago, 100 years ago, or 150 years, there was no such thing. People were doing this in horse and buggy, traveling, going up mountains. If a person is aware of these things and realizes how lucky, how privileged we are, number one, it can give a person tremendous joy and satisfaction. There are so many people today suffering from depression, unhappiness, anxiety, all kinds of things, because we don't appreciate, we don't recognize some of the good things around us. The life of luxury that we are living in, the ability to pick up a phone and talk to someone across the world, and all the other incredible, the ability to turn on a faucet and get water, cold water, hot water, filtered water, versus, again, not 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, having to go outside your house to the well somewhere and pump water. All of these things, to the degree that we recognize this and teach it, what kids are not happy. Kids are depression. They're taking drugs and other things because of depression and anxiety. One of the reasons is they're not aware of this. Nobody has shown them. They haven't been taught the difference between darkness and light. King Solomon says in Koheles, Ki Yisron ha'or min ha'choshech. In order to be able to appreciate light, you need to know what darkness is. Hashem created the world. We're told first he created darkness. There was tohu, vavohu, v'choshech. And then he said, let there be light. Why? Why didn't he start off with light? Because if you only have light and you don't know what darkness is, you can't appreciate light. If kids are brought up, raised, thinking that you press a button and everything is automatic, and if you press the button and the response that takes more than 2-3 seconds, it's time to change, get a new phone. And if you ask a wife to do something and it takes more than 2-3 seconds, time to get a new wife. Chas v'shalom. A person would say, that's real. That's real. That's society today. That is society today. If people aren't taught a little bit of history, basic history, to know where we come from, and to recognize how privileged, how lucky, how gifted we are in terms of the circumstances with the struggles. It's true that some of these luxuries are what complicate our lives if we misuse it. Those people that come home for dinner and can't shut the phone, can't put the phone in a drawer for those 30 minutes or whatever that they're going to be with their wives or with their husbands or with their children. They're missing an incredible, critical part of education for children and for ourselves. Hashem gave us Shabbat. And the Torah tells us that this is an incredible gift. People who aren't religious, people who didn't keep Shabbat, when they hear about it and they hear that you can't do this, can't do that, the whole list of can't do's, they really feel sorry for those religious people. Boy, life is difficult enough with without religion. Add religion to it, and you have 1,000 more difficulties. And then some of them walk into how they're invited to a meal on Shabbat in a religious home, and they see a father and a mother, a husband and wife sitting down at a table with the kids, and they're talking and they're singing and they're looking at this and saying, wow, I never saw this. I never had anything like this in my life. To have a meal without an interruption from a phone, distraction from a phone or certain other things. Hashem taught us that in order to have a healthy life, you have to be able to turn things off sometimes. And not only that, but we're told even when it comes to Torah, the Torah is called life. Kihu chayecha v'orech yamecha. It's called life. And yet the Gemara says, Pa'amim bitula shel Torah zui kiyuma. There are times when taking a break from Torah will ensure the continuity of the Torah. A person has to go to sleep. A person has to eat. A person needs a break sometimes. The human mind has to rest. If a person doesn't do it, they get an overload. So here again, even something that's being defined as life, we're being taught you have to know to be able to disconnect it sometimes. So for those people, if we talk about going to work is earning a living, it's important, it's very good, but to know where it begins and where it ends. And when I come home, if I want to have a healthy home, if I want to have a happy home, if I want kids to have a chance to succeed, then I have to be able to turn certain things off at certain times and to know my priorities. Religion, to most people, has all kinds of definitions. We have 30 people here. Based on what we've spoken about till now and anything else you can think of, give me one word that you would say describes religion. Belief, faith, good. Anyone else? Excuse me?
Stability.
Relationship, stability, commitment.
One said expensive.
Excuse me?
One said expensive. I didn't say that.
Okay, expensive. Continue. Excuse me. Consistency, purpose, guidance, foundation, freedom. We're getting closer. You're right. Every one of these answers was correct, but nobody came up with one word that I'm going to mention. Excuse me. A little more time. Okay, go ahead. Excuse me. Effort, connection. So, excuse me. Disconnect. Shabbat. No, I'm talking about
Judaism or religion in general?
both. Judaism. Let's talk about Judaism. Excuse me. Unity. Oh! You wait long enough. Did you hear what she said? Joy. What does that have to do with?
I think I said that. No, I'm just kidding.
What does that have to do? What does that have to do with religion? Excuse me. There's a place in the Torah. Excuse me. Chaim is life, but he just hit the nail on the head in a very powerful way. There's a pasuk there's a section in the Torah that's called the Tochacha. Tochacha means rebuke. And it appears twice in the Torah in two different places where there's 5-6 pages of Hashem saying, if you listen, if you do all the right things, you're going to receive this whole series of blessings. If you don't, bang, 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 98 bangs, 98 curses that are listed there. And it's mentioned in two places in the Torah, two different places, in Bechukotai and in Kitavo. In the second place in Kitavo, there's a one-liner at the end. You know why all of this is going to happen? Because you didn't serve Hashem with joy and happiness. With joy and happiness. Most people who attend religious schools are never told this. They're never told this piece of information. That Judaism, religion, is supposed to be happy. It's supposed to, it's connection, it's responsibility, it's up. All of those things, if you leave out this one ingredient, then most kids are going to say, no thanks. No thanks. Connection, I'm connected to my toys. Connect what? And responsibility, happiness, joy, happiness. Who would say no? Which sane person would say no? Everyone wants to be happy. It's just that people don't know that there's short-lived happiness and there's fake happiness, and there's real happiness, and there's permanent, there's eternal happiness. The Torah is a book that defines eternal happiness. Who says? Where does it say? It's a pasuk in Tehillim. Pikudei Hashem Yesharim Mesamchei Lev. The commandments of Hashem are righteous. They bring joy to the heart. A synagogue, prayer. How many of us have kids that don't want to go to shul? You want to come to synagogue with me tonight, Friday? No. I'd much rather play with my toys. Or I don't want to go. I'm tired. I don't want to walk. But one of the reasons is because they weren't taught, they weren't shown V'simachtim beveit tefilati. There's a pasuk, V'haviotim al har kodshi, I'll bring them to my holy mountain, V'simachtim beveit tefilati, and I will fill them with joy and happiness in my house of prayer. There are synagogues where there isn't joy and happiness. People come in, see you later, I'm out. Because they don't know, they weren't taught, they don't know that this is a critical element. Women bake cakes, cinnamon, leave out the flour. Just that one little, just leave out the flour from most cakes. Today we have ways of doing it, but I'm talking about standard. Put in cinnamon, all the other trimmings, leave out the flour, leave out the joy and happiness from Judaism. And unfortunately, most people aren't interested. How do you get that? Where do you get that? We need to study. We need to study the right books. There are books that explain this. Rabbi Nachman is known for this. He made a statement, mitzvah gedola liot besimcha tamid. He didn't invent it. You quoted the pasuk in the Torah. It's very clear. It's in the Torah in many places. This element of joy and happiness. What being happy about what? Here again, a person closes a deal in business. They make $100,000. They make $1 million. They make $5 million. The cemetery is full of people who made 5 million, 30 million, 5,000, all kinds of things. And if you dig, you're not going to see any of the millions. You're not going to see any of it there. It's not there. Any physical or materialistic success is short-lived. It has a timer on it. Max 100 years, 110 years today, the maximum. If we believe in Hashem, someone said emunah. If we believe in Hashem, if we believe in Torah, then if a person says a blessing on a cup of water, Baruch atah Hashem shehakol niyeh b'dvaro, that I acknowledge that this is not my water, that there's a creator, there's someone who created the world, and he made water, and if I don't make a blessing, then it's not mine, I'm stealing. If I make a blessing, it becomes mine, and it can be healthy, it can be therapeutic, it can be beneficial. These elements, if a person understands what they're doing, then each time I do it, wow, I just did something for my eternity, Again, it's obviously, this depends on faith. If a person doesn't believe in life after death, if we don't believe in Olam Haba, then it doesn't apply. But if we do believe, but we just tend to forget because of all the distractions going on around us, we forget, and then it becomes meaning. It's not a big deal. There was a story, and we'll close with this for now, although we'll take questions. One of the great rabbis, I believe his name was Reb Aaron Karliner, he had one of his students who was very wealthy, and the student decided he wants to have breakfast, a private breakfast with the rabbi. He wants to see exactly how the rabbi conducts himself in his morning meal. And the rabbi tried pushing him off for a while, but sometimes wealthy people can be stubborn, and he pushed. Okay, come. They have breakfast together. They go through the whole meal together, and they finish. And this person says, Rabbi, I want to thank you. Of course, I appreciate, I enjoy, but I want to tell you that I thought, I sort of expected that I'd see much more differences. I see basically we pretty much eat the same. Our meals are pretty similar. The rabbi said, you're right, but there's one difference. You make a beracha, you make a blessing so that you can eat. I eat so that I can make the blessings. The question is, which is more important? Which is more meaningful? Is it my body or is it my soul? Is it my body or my soul? Which the body, none of us believes that the body is permanent in any way. The body is something that has a timer on it. The soul is eternal. We make a blessing on food, we do a mitzvah, it's a deposit in eternal bank account. We do something physical, any kind of physical pleasure, it's good, it's necessary. It's necessary because what makes us superior to angels, Hashem has millions of angels and trees and birds, and none of it is as important as man because we have something that they don't. We are a marriage, a combination of spiritual and physical, a soul and a body that are two opposites, two complete opposites, just like husband and wife. And now let's see if we can marry these two together. Let's see if these two who are not identical, let's see if they can work together to help each other. That's what makes us so special. But what happens is, unfortunately, we come into the world and we get onto the treadmill and we're running and running. And the body we see, the soul we don't see, and we forget. We tend to forget. And as a result, we don't really appreciate the things that are related to the soul, the mitzvot, and those kind of things. And the more we can remember, the more we can be aware and conscious and remember who we are, what we're about, and think carefully about how we approach our relationships with each other, husband and wives, friends, neighbors, and the recognition of what a gift it is, what a privilege and pleasure it is to be able to give and to be able to pass that on to our children. We will live more fulfilling lives. They'll fulfilling lives. We'll be able to avoid psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, medications, all kinds of things. And hopefully, this will bring us closer to a healthy finish line, to the coming of the Mashiach, the building of the Bet HaMikdash, B'mhera b'yameinu, Amen v'Amen. Questions, or rebuttals? And or because shul is not a happy event. He doesn't see daddy excited about going to shul. He doesn't see an excitement that a similar excitement or a bigger excitement when somebody hears that somebody won a ball game, something that excites them. They don't see that excitement about going to shul. And in the synagogue, they don't see joy and happiness. They don't see, wow, look how lucky, look how privileged I am. To be able, there's a time, they don't know that there were times we lived in other countries where, in whether it's Syria or European countries, where you weren't allowed to go to a synagogue, a Jew couldn't go to a synagogue. Kids don't know that it's a privilege. A kid wants to go to a ball game. Why? Because it's exciting, it's special. If a kid isn't taught that a synagogue is 1,000 times more special, why would he want to go? Why would he want to go?
Don't want kids, and they're pushing where the kids. So even if you come with your kids and you think you're doing them a favor, you can push as much as you want, but it's not a fun place.
You're right, and that's a problem. Not recognizing that the kids are the most important. But here again, if the kids have respect, we're coming soon to the holiday of Purim, and Purim is the joyous holiday of the year. They read the Megillah, and there's even those shuls that don't have excitement 365 days a year, but on Purim there's the banging and the noise and the clown, all the excitement. However, one of the rabbis, and it says that it's a mitzvah to bring children, for them to. So one of the rabbis added the words, it's a mitzvah to bring children home if they can't show respect. Again, excuse me? Exactly. Quoting the Shema Kadosh, meaning that here again, that's part of the education. To know, just in a stadium, a kid is going to an exciting football game. It's not free for all that you can do anything you want. There are things you can do and get yourself thrown out of the stadium. Excuse me just for a moment. My mother is very ill, and this is a phone call related to this, possibly. Hello?
Hi,
Yes.
hi, Shmuley.
Yes.
So that's all they took her into Maimonides. She has no kayach. She can't, without the oxygen, her, goes down to the 70s.
Yes.
But she doesn't keep the concentrator on anyway.
Yes.
So they took her. My mother's with her. She's there already. And that's it. We're gonna,
Got it.
see what's gonna happen.
Please tell your mother to be in touch with me, and if I need to come, I'll do whatever I can to help. Okay?
Where are you now?
Florida, Miami.
You're in Miami. Okay.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I will pass on the message to her,
Please.
and we'll go from there. Zaidi didn't let anybody stay with him.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever, we'll
Okay.
call him in the morning.
Exactly.
Make sure that he's okay, and we'll check up on him.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for telling me.
Take care. All
Sure,
the
the
best.
best. My mother is close to 100 years old. She lives in Brooklyn, New York, and I was just there. I came here yesterday from there, and she's weak, and her oxygen level was low, and we brought the machine but she's not comfortable to. Pia, she was just taken to the hospital, Maimonides Hospital there. I dedicate the learning for a refuah for her, together with all other Cholei Israel. Everyone should. But here again, we're in the middle of a class, 1,000 people, a parent. The world stops. Kids need to know that. Kids. Her name is Yentefreda Bas Pesel. Yentefreda Bas Pesel for a refuah shalema b'toch shar Cholei Israel. Yeah. משברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב, הוא יברך וירפא את האישה, אמי ינטפרדל בס פסל, בעבור שכל הקהל מתפללים בעבורה, בשכר זה הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא רחם עליה, להחלימה, לרפאותה, להחלימה, להחיותה, ושישלח לה מהר רפואה שלמה לכל עברה לכל גידיה, בסוף שאר כל ישראל, השתה בעגלה בזמן קריב, ונאמר אמן. Thank you. Did we answer the question? Singing that, Friday, especially Friday night, Shabbat by day, there are songs to be sung, and it's something very holy, very special. The Torah tells us that one of the deepest connections to Hashem is song and music. In the Bet HaMikdash, they sang and played musical instruments 7 days a week. On Shabbat, in the Beit HaMikdash, there was song and music. The Leviim played musical instruments. We're not allowed to do that in our synagogues, but we are allowed to sing and to sing with joy. How lucky, how privileged we are to have a private audience with Hashem. I mentioned this in the previous, but it pays to repeat it. A good friend of mine, a Sephardic businessman, very wealthy, wanted to do a photo op with the president. I think it was Ronald Reagan at the time. To have a picture in his store of him with the president. People would enjoy that. He had to pay $15,000. He had to wait 3 months for the Secret Service to do all of their checks before they're going to allow a person in a room alone with the president. They told him which day and when to be there. He's not allowed to initiate any conversation. If the president says something, you can answer. Try it. Then it was 15. It might be 35 or 80 now. if he's still alive by tomorrow, our worthy president, and not allowed to initiate any conversation. It's 3 to 5 minutes, and you're done. And we speak to his boss. We speak to the creator of the world. We're told that a person comes to a synagogue. It's a guarantee that the divine 10 Jews getting together, it's a guarantee that the divine presence of Hashem is there. Again, if we're not aware of that, if we don't transmit that to our kids, why would one? If he knows, how would you like to meet this football star, this basketball president today isn't a celebrity, but tell a kid a celebrity. You know what it would take and how much you would have to pay to be able to meet this super celebrity? We're going to go see his boss now. If they're given in the terms that they can relate to, then they'll come running. Anyone else? Please.
Smaller banding to stimulate it, I'll give you this, I'll take you to the store and get you something on Sunday.
Very good question. Very good question. Very good question. Reward, punishment. The answer is yes, definitely. There is a place. Everything has its place. But not that if I'm not going to get it, then I'm not going to go. That kind of thing. It could be used to grease the wheels, to make it more exciting, to make it better. But not that a child can feel that they can say no. If the terms aren't attractive enough. This and that it's dependent on how much am I going to get for it? It's not that kind of negotiation. We're going, and come and I'll make it worth your while. You're going to enjoy. You're going to appreciate it. You're going to be happy. That kind of thing.
Another thing that I've had this with my youngest son. Sometimes in the davening on Shabbat morning, you feel like you're not keeping up with the shul, but you're teaching him how to read, or you're going at his pace on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
Definitely okay. Sure. A question of having to slow down sometimes in order to teach someone else. There are places that have a kids minyan, especially to educate, or a beginner's service. I remember 40 years ago, there was a shul in Manhattan, Lincoln Square Synagogue. And one of the rabbis there realized that people coming in, people starting to become religious, they come to they're totally lost. And they founded a beginner's minyan, where for these people who don't know how to pray yet at all, to have a service for them to be able to teach them slowly, one paragraph at that kind of thing, to be able to integrate them gradually, where they could join a regular minyan.
Well, can I say a comment?
Sure.
I think that people don't realize, even adults sometimes, that most of davening, most of prayer is praising Hashem. I mean, especially during the week, all the Halukas, and I think a lot of us are lacking in even understanding what we're saying. So to be able to bring the joy to the synagogue, it's like where a lot of us come to shul, and we're especially during the week, and everyone's so busy with work and whatever. They don't even think about how you're like, hallelujah. Like if you look at the words, you're like, whoa.
Of course. It goes back to that ability to shut things off, to know that those 30 minutes or hour that I'm going to be in the synagogue, to detach, disconnect the wires, the phone goes off, everything goes off. This is I'm meeting with the president's boss. Yeah. Anyone else? Please. You find a new synagogue. That's one response, or to see if you can improve. You're right. It's a very big problem. Some of these kids minyanim, it's only fun. They get involved in the fun and they forget the religion. They forget that this was, that there's a purpose to this. There's a goal that we're trying to use the candy to initiate. There's a story with a rabbi, one of the great rabbis, Rabbi Abba, who once went out into the street and he said, "Who wants to become wealthy? Who wants wealth?" And there was a young boy, teenager, 18, who saw him, and he saw the rabbi looked legitimate. So he said, "I do." He said, "Okay, come with me." and he took him into the yeshiva, and he told him, sit down and come and study with us, and you'll be wealthy. So he stayed there for a couple of weeks, and he's looking at the rabbi. He's waiting for the wealth, and he figures maybe the rabbi forgot the deal. So he goes over to him after a couple of weeks, and he says, you remember what you offered when I first came here? The rabbi said, of course, I didn't forget at all. Continue. He continues studying, and he starts enjoying it. He starts enjoying it and appreciating it. And now he feels ashamed and embarrassed that he thought he was coming for the candy. He sees there's something much better than the candy. He appreciates the knowledge. It's being given, it's being taught in a good way, in a sweet way. It's being done the right way. And now he's embarrassed over the fact that he came, he was coming for the wrong reason. So he goes over to the rabbi and he says, I feel ashamed and embarrassed about, the rabbi says, great, keep it up. A short while later, and this is a true story, a man came into the yeshiva and he had 13 goblets of puz. The Gemara says that there are different levels of gold, of refined gold. Puz is one of the rarest types of gold in the world, and this person was obviously very wealthy. He had 13 goblets like this, and he said, I have a daughter that's the finest of the finest, and I came to the rabbi, I want you to give me your best student for my daughter. He says, I have just the right person for him. This Yossi here, Rabbi Yossi. And sure enough, the Gemara says, they from that time on, they called him Rabbi Yossi ben Pazi. The Rabbi Yossi of Paz. He's the one who married, he got the wealth and everything. So here again, it starts. You have to make it fun and attractive, but if you stop there, if you're only doing the fun, you're missing the boat, you're missing the purpose. Unfortunately, many of our synagogues could use improvement. You have to do the best you can. Yeah. There's a story, maybe also related, a short story. The Baal HaTanya, the first rabbi of Lubavitch, was once traveling, and he was known that to him it was very important to pray with the minyan. And he came to a village, and he goes into a house there, and they offer him food and everything. And he says, do you have a minyan here? What kind of minyan? There's six religious Jews here. He said, really? No minyan? They said, no minyan. He said, what about on the high holidays? What do you do on the high for Rosh Hashanah Kippur? He said, we go, there's a city about 100 kilometers from here. We go there for the high holidays. He said, really? How many families are there in that city? He said, about 200. So then why are you living here? He said, because I have to earn a living. My livelihood is here. He said, I don't understand. Hashem can support 200 families there, and he can't support 201. You have to be here because your livelihood is here. You don't think you could make a lot, And the discussion was closed, was finished. The rabbi went to sleep. He lay down to rest. An hour or two later, he gets up and he sees they're moving furniture around. And he's looking, he's watching. He said, what's going on? They said, we heard what the rabbi said, and it made sense. We're packing up. So sometimes, if something is really important to a person, they have to make the right decision. When a person is looking for a place to live or a place to pray, you want to choose carefully, a place that you're going to get where the things that are most important to you, you're going to be able to have. Please partake from the refreshments. It's a mitzvah, it's a shiur in Torah, and any blessings that are made should be a blessing to the home, to the Rouimi's home, to all of us, to those that are sick, that need the refuah. The brachot should be for refuah shalema for them. Yes. There's a website called breslovtorah.com, BRESLOV.com, that has a few thousand classes from my Rabbi Rosenfeld, who, if anything we said was interesting, you'll hear things that are 100 times more interesting from my rabbi, and also classes that I've given. There's cards here that have the website address, that have an email address. If anyone wants to be in touch by email, by phone, please feel free. Thank you. Rabbi Rosenfeld. Yeah. Yeah. From New York. I met him when I was 16 years old, and I had the privilege of learning with him quite a bit. And if you do classes, you'll appreciate it anyway.